All right, it's 15 minutes before we say goodbye here on Morning Live. The National Union of Metalworkers of South Africa, which is NUMSA, says they are elated that along with the Transform RSA, stopped Eskom from signing 27 contracts with independent power producers, which is your IPPs. NUMSA and Transform RSA obtained an urgent interdict to temporarily stop Eskom on Monday night at the North Gauteng High Court. The matter will now be heard in the North Gauteng Court on the 27th. Joining us now is Phakamile Hlubi, the spokesperson of NUMSA. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's just get clarity first. Now, you say the interdict was granted. I'm reading reports now that the Department of Energy says, it wasn't granted, but they just decided to stop signing or going ahead with the signing. What's the truth here?
It's quite laughable. It's called spin doctoring. That's precisely what the Department of Energy is embarking on. The question one should ask themselves is, what stopped them from signing yesterday? The only thing which had the power to stop them from proceeding with signing on Tuesday was the fact that the court made it very clear that if they were to go ahead and sign those IPPs on Tuesday, they would be in contempt of court. That's an interdict. And that is why, and that was granted to us late on Monday night. Up until that point, the department could have at any point reached out to us and said, actually, let's sit down and have a discussion around these issues and negotiate and actually understand what the issues are. So you've never had those discussions? No. I mean, the fact is we were forced on Monday night to approach the North Gauteng High Court on an urgent basis. That should tell you the attitude of the department when it comes to engagement. So really, we dismiss those reports with the contempt that they deserve. The only power that had the force and the legal power to stop the department from railroading us on this was the fact that the court made it blatantly clear that if they sign, they would be in contempt of court. And that's why on the 27th of March, we are going back to the urgent court where the case will be heard and the matter will be heard. Our original application, which is what we will be arguing on the 27th of March, the question that the court needs to answer is whether the Department of Energy can proceed with signing these IPP agreements when there is already a case in court to deal with this matter. Last year, the Coal Transporters Forum lodged an application with the High Court around these issues. They were raising pertinent questions around the process, around the IPPs, what was involved in that process, how did they arrive at this project, and what its implications are going to mean for all those stakeholders involved and all those affected, including workers, including the coal sector companies, and all of that. The court then agreed to that and actually gave them a court date where this entire case will be ventilated in September. So our application was that we wanted to join that court action. All right. But we needed the court to stop the Department of Energy from proceeding with signing the IPPs when they know very well that this case is still in the courts and these matters still need to be heard in open court. All right. Now, the reports are once again saying that the department will still go ahead with the signing of the contracts after the 27th of March. So they're preempting the outcome of the urgent court. Looks like it. Clearly. That's really disappointing coming from the Department of Energy. They have a duty to adhere to the rule of law. Perhaps what they should do is rather focus on what the judges will say on that day as to whether or not they'll actually be able to proceed. But these contracts with IPPs, what do they mean for the employment sector? Well, this is precisely why, as NUMSA, we've had to resort to going to court in order to get some answers. From the very first time that this discussion around IPPs began, you'll remember it actually began sometime last year when President Jacob Zuma announced that Eskom must now sign the IPP contracts. Eskom already made it clear last year that by signing the IPP contracts, that would mean the closure of at least 5 power stations in Mpumalanga and the loss of at least 30,000 jobs in that region. When we heard that, from that time, NUMSA has been vociferous in opposing this because we knew that it would have a fundamental impact on workers and their families. We think it is very important, and I think it's really important that viewers must know this. Our position on renewables is that we are not opposed to renewables, but you're not going to solve the problem of fossil fuels and pollution of the environment by creating a new problem through joblessness. if there's going to be a replacement of the coal sector with the renewable sector, then the renewable sector needs to be able to employ workers at the same mass levels that Eskom was able to do.
I think that's what the government said. The government promised job creation when these projects kick in.
Well, last year, the same government confirmed that the IPPs would not actually be able to absorb the 30,000 jobs that would be lost in the sector. It's really surprising that now suddenly they claim that the same sector which was unable to absorb jobs last year at 30,000 is now going to create 61,000 jobs. As far as we're concerned, that's just propaganda. This is not the first time that the state has dangled the carrot of job creation in the faces of the working class and has has basically duped them into accepting policies which were hurtful to them. This time around, we are demanding engagement, we are demanding transparency, we are demanding full disclosure on what these IPP agreements mean. We want real guarantees that not a single job will be lost as a result of the transition from coal to energy.
All right. Now, NUMSA says it has its own suspicions on this rush signing of contracts. What are your suspicions?
Well, of course. I mean, if the state was genuine and really meant what it said about engagement, first of all, we would have not had to resort to court. Last year, as I mentioned, this process began. We tried several times to engage with the then Minister of Energy as well as Eskom, and we've tried repeated times. Furthermore, we are a recognized trade union within Eskom. All of those discussions we have not had at all, either with Eskom or with the Department of Energy. It's clear to us that they have no interest in engaging members of the working class, who are, by the way, not only the majority, but also the people who are going to be most affected by these decisions. So the way it seems to us, it does seem that this is another example of looting by the state. Last year, it was the Guptas which were using Eskom to loot. Now, this new dispensation has brought in its own other faction of looters who are going to loot through these IPPs. We are not convinced, for example, that these IPPs aren't going to be used as a way to privatize Eskom through the back door, which we know very well is the state's intention. And that's why it's very important to us as a trade union to get full disclosure on these contracts, who these players are, and how this process will affect our members and their families.
All right, so what happens next? Will you attempt for further engagements, or would you initiate engagements, or do you wait for the 27th of March?
We continue to call on the department to engage us. But if they are not going to do so in a reasonable manner, we have no problem with going to court, which is why we took the original action in the first place. We are not going to be railroaded into agreeing to policies which are not actually in the interest of working class people and their families. This decision is going to have very, very real implications for ordinary workers and their families. I want you to imagine, for example, if tomorrow the SABC was to announce that your job was going to be replaced by a robot. Surely you would want to have something to say about what that means and the implications for you. You have a right to be engaged because it has a real impact on you and your life.
All right.
And it's important that people must understand that there are real lives that are going to be affected by this decision, and this government needs to take the working class in this country very seriously when it comes to these types of decisions.
All right, Phakamile, we have to leave it at that due to time constraints, but thank you so much for coming through. We'll wait and see what happens on the 27th. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much indeed to Phakamile Hlubi, the spokesperson of NUMSA, of course, talking to us about the contracts that were supposed to be signed yesterday by the Department of Energy. Well, this matter is still in court now. As I said, we'll wait and see what the outcomes are on the 27th. We're taking a quick ad break here on Morning Live, and then when we come back, we'll say our goodbyes.